This feels pretty significant right now for Pentax, a major manufacturer making a brand new film camera in 2024. It's very exciting, it's interesting, there's a lot to talk about, and that's what I want to do today. I have so many thoughts on the camera itself. Pentax making a new camera, and it's a 35 millimeter half frame. How are people going to respond to that? There's a lot to talk about, and we'll get into all of that. I'll share some first impressions, of course. I haven't had the camera for very long. Full transparency, Pentax, they sent me this camera to try out. I have no idea whether or not I get to keep this camera yet, but they're not paying me to make the video or anything. All they offered was a chance to try the camera out, and I said, absolutely. So I'm going to share my thoughts here, good and bad. It's not a perfect camera by any means. It's not the one camera I would be able to own, but it is interesting, and there's a case for it. So we'll talk about all of that in this video and just what this means for film photography. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, when the word first got out that Pentax was making a half-frame camera, I was not interested for myself personally. I was really excited to see Pentax making a new camera because any new film camera in 2024, that's great for all of us. It's great for film photography. However, half frame, for whatever reason, it's never been something that I've been interested in using on a regular basis. For whatever reason, I've always just thought of half frame as like every once in a while it might be fun to use, but not something I would use regularly. So I wasn't interested in the camera myself, but the first time I actually held it in my hands and started shooting with it, for whatever reason, it just feels good. It feels really good to shoot with. I love the design of it in general, but just the way it feels. This little grip right here, this is where the battery goes, and it just adds a nice little extra grip, and even the little manual film advance. A manual film advance on a camera that has automatic features, but then there's some manual features. It's a really interesting combination, I think. But I like it. It feels good and natural to just have the advance lever right here at my thumb. It feels obviously not the same as using my M6, but I typically hold the camera like that with my thumb on the advance lever. Just a nice little grip for such a small camera. You have a 25mm f3.5 lens, and this is entirely done with scale focusing. You're setting the distance on the lens for whatever it is you're trying to shoot. On top of the lens, you have the little icons, the mountains, a group of 3 people, 2 people, 1 person, a fork and knife, which is sort of like taking photos at a dinner table, the person sitting across from you. But then you also have this flower or macro feature for really, really close focusing. But again, you're not seeing that through this little viewfinder right here. So you're really going to need to know your distances. And luckily on the bottom of the lens, there are 2 scales here. You have 1 scale for meters, 1 scale for feet. So it's nice to know that you can actually see what specific distance you're at and not just relying on these little icons. But the little icons are what you're going to see when you're looking through the viewfinder. Now, one thing that's pretty important to scale focusing, zone focusing, is being able to manually select your aperture so you know specifically what your depth of field range is. And you're not going to be able to manually set the aperture on this camera. You also have a pretty good flash here built into the camera. On top of this little dial here, you have different options in white, different options in yellow, and fully automatic. Automatic mode, it's going to do everything for you. If it needs to use the flash, it will. If it doesn't, then it won't. Of course, while it's going to do all of that for you, you can use exposure compensation, which is located right here, and also just making sure you set the film speed accordingly. But other than that, make sure your distance is right and just rely on automatic. That's a really nice way of shooting the camera, in my opinion. It's become a very quick and just sort of candid snapshot kind of camera, which I think fits half frame really well, considering you get 72 or more photos on one roll. But also on this little mode dial outside of just auto, you have options that are in white and options that are in yellow. The yellow options, this means it is always going to use the flash, and the white options means it's not going to use the flash even if it thinks it needs it. You also have nice little LEDs here in the viewfinder that are going to let you know if the lens cap is on, if you're not going to have enough light and you should use the flash and it's not currently set up in order to do so. It has a lot of nice little kind of fail-safe features in there in the LEDs, so that's nice. But on this dial in the no flash mode, you have P, a moon, bokeh. We'll talk about that in a little bit, and B for bulb. Now, program mode, P mode, it's going to choose the aperture and shutter speed accordingly, but again, it's not going to use the flash like automatic would if the camera thinks it needs it. The little moon icon for longer exposures, it's still going to be automatic exposure, so it's not manual long exposures like bulb would be, but the little moon icon, if you set it to that, the camera is basically going to give you a slower minimum shutter speed. Bokeh mode, this is really the only time you're going to guarantee what your aperture is set to. Bokeh mode is basically just forcing the camera to shoot wide open at f3.5 at all times. Why didn't they just put f3.5 instead of putting bokeh on a dial like this, or a mode dial? I don't really know. That's an interesting choice, but that's how you shoot wide open at all times if you're looking for bokeh. And then B, not B for bokeh, B for bulb. This is where you're going to be doing your manual long exposures. And that is the little mode dial up here. Also, I haven't mentioned it yet, but if it's not glaringly obvious, you have your little on-off switch right here on the shutter release button. And although the shutter release button isn't threaded for a cable release, you do have a little cable terminal right here in the back of the camera as well. And just like most manual film cameras, when you're done with the roll, you just press this little button here on the bottom, flip up this little crank, and then just manually wind it up and then lift up on the crank to open the back. That's pretty much the whole camera and how it works and all the features it has, but just for my own personal use, again, only one roll, very early impressions, but there's something about the camera that just feels good. It feels fun to shoot with, and I find myself wanting to bring this really just wherever I go. Like, it's an easy, small camera to always have with you. For instance, Molly and I, we went to see Orville Peck in Columbus like the day that I got this camera, and I just set it to P, the program mode without the flash, and just held the camera up, just kind of setting the distance and guessing the framing, and they didn't care that I brought this camera in. I just had Molly put it in her purse, and when we went in, they checked her bag, and they're like, okay, little camera. Like, if it were something bigger or more professional looking, sometimes venues can be weird about that. But something like this that I could just have her toss in her purse, and again, not super worried about how well the photos turn out or anything. I just wanted to, one, obviously test the camera since I just gotten it, but just have something that's a little more carefree, a little more like playful and fun. Taking photos of the kids, it's just been a really nice little, almost kind of like little diary or little journal camera in a way. But would I use it outside of just that? No. I mean, I would use it a lot in that way, but if you're not interested in a camera for that reason, I guess, I don't know how well you could really make the argument for this over something that's going to give you all of that manual control. And I don't think this is meant to replace or compete with any professional cameras or cameras that do have more features or functionality. I think this fits that kind of niche role really well, where it's just a little fun, playful snapshot kind of camera, but you still get good image quality. I want to make that clear. Saying it's a snapshot camera or something, you're still getting good image quality for sure. It wouldn't be the only camera I own. I wouldn't take only this camera somewhere if I was going with the intent of taking photos, or at least the goal of taking as many photos as I can. I wouldn't bring just this camera. This feels like a really good fit to accompany another camera, whether it be a 35mm or a medium format camera. I get the idea of, kind of adding it to the kit, but not just being that one do-it-all camera. And again, I don't think that's what they're going for with this camera, but just for everyone's different use cases, I'm trying to provide just who I think would actually enjoy or benefit from the camera, because I don't think it's just something that everybody would love or would want to use. But I do want this to succeed. I do want people to pick this up. And I think that there are enough people who really love film photography to the extent of just nerding out on it completely. I'm right there with you. Those people are going to want to pick this camera up because it's a new film camera and it's exciting and it's like a moment in time for film photography. But I also see people that will kind of look at it as, why would I spend, $500, $600, whatever it may be, on this camera as opposed to a manual SLR that I can get with a lens or multiple lenses for the same price? I fully get that. That makes total sense. And so I know there are going to be people who think, I love film photography, but that's not for me. My only hope is that there are enough people who are into the idea, not so, Pentax can make more money or so they can cut me a deal. There's nothing like that going on here. I'm not trying to get people to buy the camera here. If it ain't for you, do not buy it. But I hope there are enough people who are into the idea with the hope that Pentax will see that success and go, okay, maybe we do one that's not half frame. Maybe we release a version of this or something similar that is a full 35 millimeter, even if it's, still scale focus or even if there are some changes. A small compact 35 millimeter camera that's not half frame, I think that would be probably even more appealing than something like this. If they wanted to make like a proper SLR, like a manual SLR, came out with all of those lenses that are out there, that's why I want this to succeed and why I'm excited about it at the possibility of something like that down the road. I don't think anybody's against the idea of more film cameras coming in the future. So I hope you enjoyed the photos here. Also, I want to provide a little bit more photos right here. These were shot by my good friend Trev Lee. Trev has had a very long amount of time with the camera, and I asked him if he could share some of his photos so I could provide more samples. Having shot only one roll myself in the short amount of time I had, I wanted to make sure I could provide as many image samples as I can so you can see exactly, what you can get with this lens on a half frame. Major shout out to Trev Lee for sending these photos over. You can follow him down below. He does all kinds of great work with the darkroom. As a matter of fact, we have a video coming very soon where Trev and I went out to Put-in-Bay, shot some photos on the island for the day. It was my first time there, and I'm excited for that video. But that's all on the Pentax 17. Very, very excited and curious as to what you all think of this camera. Please keep the conversation going and let me know your thoughts down below. Again, big thanks to Pentax for letting me try the camera out ahead of the launch. And that's it for today. So thank you guys for watching. I love you, and I'll see you next time.